Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sports Shorts Daily, presented by LeBears Casino. Ronnie Rance alongside Tommy Chrysan. And today, very special guest Robin Fambrough joining us from The Advocate, courtesy of the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame. Miss Robin, good morning. Tommy, good morning.
Good morning.
The reason we asked you to join us, and we appreciate you taking time out, is there was a statewide story that's sort of very odd. You know, these types of things don't happen on this scale or get this much attention, it seems.
Well, actually, they do. They've happened over the years. This is just the first one like this in recent years, and you have to understand we're a few months removed from the deal with Opelousas postseason, where they were stripped of the title, and then some other things happened. We also had in March a team that was taken off the bracket in the semifinals after they reported a violation. They self-reported an academic violation of a kid who did not complete work on a first semester project. And you know how that becomes a F after a certain amount of time? Once that was factored in, the player was ineligible. And the team was in the semifinals and they were taken out. So
has there ever been a situation where the playoffs were almost delayed or were delayed due to, I know it didn't, and it's not going to end up happening this time, but that was the threat that the playoffs could have been delayed a week for the high school football due to a situation where University High is filed a lawsuit against the LHSAA. Now that's not going to happen.
Right. But we've had situations over the years, and this goes back to the Tommy Henry era. And I think even it stretched a little bit into the Kenny Henderson era, where for several years, either in week 9 or week 10, people were turning people in. We had a few playoffs that started with an empty spot on the bracket where somebody advanced because there was no team there. They were removed on the eve of the playoffs because of what was found out. I remember one time being in Alexandria for the girls basketball tournament, and this was many years ago. This was in the 90s, where the boys were playing in the quarterfinals for the chance to go to the tournament the following week. And a team that had won the game, they had to come back the next day and say, no, we found this and you're not going to be going. In that case, the team that they beat advanced. But in most cases, it's usually, you know, the team doesn't advance. In this case, my understanding is if something happens and U High is not able to play next week through the court system, however it plays out, if they're ruled against, the two teams that are playing this week that would play them, whoever the winner is, would advance.
Well, let's set up for the folks out there that don't know what's going on. That a couple of weeks back, I guess, a week and a half ago, was it? What was the timeline that
It started around week 9 of the regular season, and that's something that different people are saying different things about. I don't know the exact particulars of it.
So there were
what I've seen, but there was a situation where they were told there was an investigation into 2 players on their team who had transferred from another school, and in the court documents, the school in question was named as Liberty.
So 2 transfer from Liberty allegedly back in January. Of course, here we are in November. Those players played during the season, and then around week 9, they were told by the LHSAA, okay, hey, they're ineligible. You're gonna have to forfeit all your games.
Well, they were first told there was an investigation into it, and they didn't play them in the week 9 game against Madison Prep. They were told, as we clear this up, because sometimes you can clear things like that up.
Right, sure.
Somebody has a question, just don't play the kids this week, and that's what they did.
So they didn't play them week 9, and then they were told in between week 9 and week 10 that they were, had to forfeit all their wins, which in essence made them 0-9 for the season and no chance at the playoffs. They file an injunction, a suit.
They got a temporary restraining order, a TRO.
Right.
And like I tried to explain too, a TRO only lasts a certain amount of time. We've had those over the years too. There was a case, again, many years ago where a TRO was filed on behalf of some players at a school who had transferred. They refuted the transfer policy. The TRO allowed them to play for 3 or 4 weeks. When the TRO ran out, the LHSAA went back in and reinstated the forfeits and gave them forfeits for all the games the kids played in.
In this case, what we're hearing, and you're telling me it sounds like maybe you're not 100% sure, is that what about this 10-day rule thing? The 10 days.
That's one of the key points in this. The other thing that's come into question is the concurrence form that schools fill out. Some people are saying it's not a violation of the 10-day rule.
And can you explain what the 10?
Well, there's a difference between, for the LHSAA, the Constitution and the bylaws. Constitution is one set of major articles. The 10-day rule is a bylaw that's listed on the books in another part of the LHSAA's handbook that says you should not initiate an investigation within 10 days. Now, how there are exceptions to it, but how that's applied, and that one of the reasons why this came into being is because during that time where we had them every couple of years, where somebody came in and said, "Oh yeah, that so and so's got an ineligible player," it was to kind of stop all of that. And now, how that does or doesn't apply to this, I can't say. The LHSAA doesn't believe it applies to it.
So the bylaws, there's a rule that says 10 days.
But that's separate from the Constitution.
Of the 10 days within the start of the playoffs.
It's a separate bylaw, and like I say, there are exceptions to it. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't stay at Holiday Inn Express last night. I can't really make that assessment, but that's going to be for the judge, and that's one of the arguments I think that UHI has in their deal. And then another thing that the concurrence form has come up because when a player transfers, what coaches and ADs tell me is you go into your computer system when you're registering athletes and you note that they're a transfer, and you put in information, and in theory the kid's name pops up, and you fill out a concurrence form that's sent to the other school. Part of the thing about this particular case was one of the athletes was still on Liberty's roster of athletes. So, what happened? There's questions about what happened with the concurrence form. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that. And then also school attendance zones. The LHSAA is not responsible for knowing every school attendance zone or the ins and outs of all of them. But when you're in larger cities in Louisiana, and that means Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and Shreveport, there are some unique caveats that go into that with attendance zones and where they are. And part of what UHI's court filing the other day stated was that when they checked the addresses of these two athletes, they were in the McKinley zone, because you realize McKinley, and everybody in Baton Rouge knows McKinley, Liberty, and UHI are all kind of like right there. And it's goofy sometimes who is in the same attendance zone and who isn't. Like in New Orleans, Jay Roth was telling me the other day, they're not in the same attendance zone with East Jeff, even though you could probably throw a stone across the canal and hit their fence or whatever. So it's complicated at best. Schools have to rely on the information they get from school systems. And I will tell you that's happened multiple times over the years where I've been covering the LHSAA, where people have thought they've registered their kids in the right zone, and they come in with that's when we used to be able to cover hardship hearings, that when they moved into the zone, they thought they were legal, and then they found out either the zone had changed or, they were.
So where we're at in the process right now is that the playoffs are moving on as would have been the case had UHI not.
Right, that's correct. That's correct. But part of the TRO is they had to withdraw their penalties that they had, and kind of like I told you with the other case, they could be reinstated if UHI doesn't prevail at the end of the TRO. I'm not sure what the length of the TRO is in this case, but there usually is a time limit on them to give time for the case to work through the courts. So right now, yeah, it's just like it was if they had, finished the season at 8-2, which, If you want to use the argument a lot of people use, on the field they did. So, here we are. They've got a bye, and it's a deal where you've got a little more time for things to play out legally before they would have to play in the second round of the playoffs.
So there'll be a hearing on Monday the 18th. If they
unless they make a motion to get it sooner. I don't know about that. I don't have access to the court filings or anything like that. We have a different writer who does that. But right on the books, it's listed as a court hearing on the 18th. That's what we know.
Why the heck would they not it be done sooner?
Judge might not be available. That was one of the hang-ups with the thing of last year with the select definition. They had to make sure it was before a certain judge. They had to make sure that they had a time in his docket when they could hear it. And at one point, it didn't look like he was going to have time in his docket for, like 2 or 3 weeks, and it eventually was worked out. But that's usually one of the factors that goes into play.
This is definitely a bizarre situation. It's got to be odd for Tommy. I want to ask you. It's got to be weird for those coaches and players over at U High to be sitting there on pins and needles. I guess practicing, preparing to play.
Sure. Oh, they have to.
Could be nothing.
Well, they have to proceed we're going to have games Friday, and U High has a bye. They're going to play the winner of a game as we stand today. So they have to proceed until they're told different. It's kind of like the Rougarou rainout thing. You go to the park until it's a rainout. So all the coaches, not just U High, but the other coaches, and all the teams in the playoffs, they have to act like nothing's going on. Then if all of a sudden the phone rings or the email pops in and says, now this is what we're doing, then they got to adjust. Coaches they live their lives making adjustments, in a game and outside of a game. So it's unfortunate, and I guess the teams who can, don't let the, noise distract them, don't worry about what you can't control. You just got to go forward. As Robin said, it's not the first time this has happened in LHSAA, and it's probably not going to be the last time something like this happens. But it's tough, but the coaches who have been around, I think they'll be able to handle it.
Robin, let me ask you, do you have any history, or is there a rule in place that says the other team's got to have 48 hours to prepare to play, or when's the latest?
That's not really gonna. I don't think that's really going to come into play here. I don't think that's really going to come into play. I think they'll get it. If the court date is Monday, that's going to be fine. They'll play probably whoever, they'll play Friday. And I mean, like Tommy said, they're prepared now. U High is probably going to go scout the 2 teams that, that they would play the winner of. And then by the same token, those teams have plenty of film on U High already. That stuff is out there.
Robin, well, let me ask you this, Robin. We're going to have games this Friday night, okay? Yeah. Somebody's going to win and be scheduled to play U High in round 2. Right. If U High doesn't get the result of the court that they want to hear, that team that won this Friday may actually pick up a win in round 2 and advance to round 3. Is that correct?
I don't know that they'd get a win. I just think they'd advance.
Well, they'd advance. They'd move on as if they got a win.
Right. They would move on. I don't know that you'd necessarily award them with a win. I don't know
I guess I should use the word advance.
Yeah, they would advance. Yeah, that's happened before. I mean, like I say, in March we had a case where they had to reach out to a coach who was preparing for what he thought was going to be a semifinal the next day, and it was kind of funny because it was one of our coaches came and asked me if I had a phone number, and I did. I didn't know what they needed it for. We were in Hammond, and they didn't get him. They wound up getting the athletic director, and they said, well, we know why you can't find him. He's in there watching film. He's watching all the film he can watch. And they said, well, you can tell him he doesn't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Robin, let me ask you, sorry, we'll all be waiting. The good news is that for a couple days there, they thought that because it was basically the bracket was put on hold for a minute. There was a thought that this investigation was going to affect all 8 brackets. They were all going to be delayed. Maybe the state championships would. The playoffs would be even pushed back a week. What happened? Was it the TRO that
the TRO is what put that into motion. Now, the thing that people didn't understand, and I think once the power ratings came out, or once the finals pairings came out Sunday, I think they started to, is when you're dealing with power ratings, you think, because several people said, well, that's just 3A. They can go, or Division II, in this case, Division II select. Why don't they just go on ahead and release the other brackets? They can't, because U-High played 5A schools. They played 3A schools, and it not only impacts them, it impacts every team they played in their power rating. And in their district, they had several teams that played 1A schools. So there was kind of a domino effect where, I guess ultimately it impacted schools in every classification. I know I spoke with, I'll invoke Rummel again. I've known Jay Roth for years, who's the athletic director down there, and he actually called me on Thursday of last week about, if all of this stood, what it would do to their power rating, where they would have fallen to, and, and then what happened when it came back up. But see, it also, and if he noted that it impacted everybody they played. So it's not just about one team when you're talking about power ratings.
So what they ended up letting them keep their wins, and then we'll deal with it in court.
Right. And there were several people who questioned, why not just do this and let it play out, let the season play out, and then do it afterwards.
Right.
The TRO kind of puts a time frame on it, because several people had said, well, that's kind of what happened with Opelousas, and no, actually last year, and that's actually not really the case. I think that came up after the season to a degree. There were some questions that were raised, but I don't know that there was anything that started until after the two district rivals, Opelousas and Cecilia, played in the title game.
Since you've been covering high school sports for what, 40, 50 years?
No, not that long. 30 something.
Okay, I'm around. Since you've been covering sports forever and know it as well as anybody, the last, Henderson and Henry, and now Eddie Bonine, and all the people involved. If you see this ball, you could do anything you wanted. Money's not an object. Whatever, you just do whatever you wanted and take over and change something about the LHSAA, put it in place. What would it be that you think would help the organization statewide?
Oh, that's a complicated question. I don't even know how I could answer that, because so much has changed. When I first started covering the LHSAA, when I came to Baton Rouge, it was like 1991 when I took over full time. And at that time, you really only had, I think, first, second, and third place teams in the playoffs. There were no power ratings. There were no, you had public-private school issues where people grumbled. But even since the split passed in 2013, so much has changed. That's why you have the balance of select and non-select schools. School choice, and you have charter schools, you have public schools that have magnet components and everything, and they have different ways to attract students. I mean, they made one example last year that, as a kid who grew up going to a traditional public school in another state, or traditional public schools in another state, it blew my mind that, the eligibility was based on where the kid lived coming into ninth grade. And this was, I think, in the Lafayette area. And the example they cited was that from the time this kid was in pre-K, they never went to a school in their home attendance zone, because they had applied to and gone to public schools for gifted and talented students that were not located in their attendance zone.
Mm-hmm. Is the biggest frustration eligibility of athletes, or is the biggest frustration select, non-select?
Well, they're kind of hand in hand. Everybody wants to be what they want to be. There's one school in North Louisiana, Northwood of Shreveport, that really they were put in the select side and really fought that, and ultimately won, because they had a program at one point that had other students from other zones, including some football players who were there, but that was ended. So they went back to the non-select side. And, the goofy thing, they had one school that when they were checking all of this initially, that had magnet in it's on the school building. And the school told them, that's just the building. We haven't been a magnet school in X number of years. So,
Yeah, that's bizarre. All right, so she did a good job, Tommy, at dodging that answer.
Yeah, I will dodge that answer, because, you're never going to make everybody happy.
Right.
And I don't know that I would like to see a situation where everybody plays together again.
Right.
At this point in time, I don't see that as happening because there's too much divisiveness. However, when you look at the way the schools are now under the new definition of select and non-select, it's pretty much a 50-50 split. So, part of you wants to say, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? But,
it definitely makes sense and would make life easier if you had lesser classifications. And quite frankly, it would make the sport better because the Louisiana is not a big state.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And too many teams in the playoffs. Somebody was complaining about the number of losing teams in the playoffs. It's actually less under this format where where it's more equal. I mean, a couple of years ago, as somebody noted yesterday, I think it was 14-0 Productions. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago that Carver had a 50-game losing streak and they made the playoffs.
It's crazy.
And that's not a good deal for anybody.
One last thing before we let you go. You went into the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame a couple of years back as a Service Award winner, and you're obviously involved in the selection process outside of that year. This year, a couple of high school coaches are going in June of 2025. Danny Broussard, over the head basketball coach at St. Thomas More currently, and then, of course, Dale Weiner, the retired Catholic High football coach. Just a quick little thought on both of those gentlemen. I know you're close to both, especially Dale.
Yeah, I mean, very deserving, and I kind of describe our process for selection a little like my dad owned a meat company, and I sometimes got drafted to go in there and work when they were a little shorthanded. And the process they always said about hamburger was you wouldn't eat it if you knew how it was processed. I don't know that that's totally true, but it is a little different, and our process is very precise. There's a lot of different points of view, a lot of different voices. And I have to explain that to high school people sometimes that immediately after the selection that, well, how come so-and-so didn't get in? And I said, it takes time. I think the time was right for both Danny and Dale. One's a 317-win football coach, one of the top group there. And then, of course, Danny, the only person who's ahead of him in coaching wins in Louisiana is Charles Smith. And I just saw him get inducted into the Naismith Hall of Fame along with Simone Augustus last month. So very deserving, and people play the what if game. Well, couldn't you have waited on this one, or couldn't you have done that? It's never a perfect process, but I'm always proud of what we do. And I think it's a great class, and I'm always happy and thrilled when we get high school people in it. Coach Swallow from the Ville Platte area is also in, ironically, also a championship boxer at LSU. So that's kind of cool. Because everybody thinks, people downgrade, big Hall of Fames don't consider high school people. We do. Yeah. And I'm proud of that.
Yeah, and quite frankly, we've kind of been in a pattern where we've really had at least one a year, a high school coach.
Yes.
And this year we've got two, and Coach Swallow's going in for his boxing prowess, but obviously just as more well at Ville Platte area in that part of the state for his high school coach success. Well, looking forward to it. Those are two big names, and of course I'm very Danny, and looking forward to him. Danny Broussard will actually be playing in our Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame golf tournament on Monday.
Oh, very good. Very good.
November 18th. Joe Sherman will be there as well.
Another great coach.
Going into the Hall of Fame. April Burkholder will be playing as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have 3 of the 2025 class participating Monday morning at U Club at Baton Rouge. If you want to play, go to playsportshall.com. We've got spots available as well. Robin, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. I really appreciate it. Sort of a tricky subject, of course, and a big one with the state of Louisiana. We appreciate you explaining everything.
Well, I hope I helped it make sense in some ways, and some of it you just kind of have to wait and see how it plays out, and that's where we are.
All right. Thank you so much, Robin.
Thank
Family
you.
advocate. Tommy, one of those, I appreciate her joining us. I mean, there's nobody that knows more about high school sports, the LHSAA, all the inner workings. I mean, like everyone around the state of Louisiana calls her at the Advocate Baton Rouge for an explanation, as opposed to anyone else. But it looks like the cleanest thing they came up with is what they figured on. And I think it's going to work out in the sense that, hey, everybody go about your business, play as if they had all those wins. Uh, during the regular season. We'll deal with it in week 2. If they're ineligible, bam, whoever they were scheduled to play against will just simply get a forfeit victory and move on. If they are eligible to play, those 2 players, ineligible players, probably won't play. I can't imagine a scenario where the 2 ineligible players are able to play. I mean, clearly they didn't do the paperwork right. Clearly something went wrong. It's just, I think it's all about that 10-day window. There's a bylaw that says you cannot have an investigation. You can't have a ruling within 10 days of the playoffs. It's kind of like your taxes. There's a statute of limitations. If you happen to get away with it within 10 days of the start of the playoffs, we're not going to implement any. That's what UI is sort of relying on. We'll see what the judge, if they agree or not.
Yeah, we'll have to see. As Robin said, and you've said for a long time, let it play out. Okay, proceed like you're supposed to proceed, and then if they tell you got to shift gears, then you got to shift gears and adjust. I mean, again, coaches and athletes, they live their lives adjusting, so they'll be able to handle it.
The real quick before we wrap up for today, we'll be back Friday morning. The playoffs, college football playoff bracket came out last night. We now know at this, it's amazing how it changes from week to week. No Georgia in there, no LSU in there. How about the fact that the way the championship and how BYU would host the playoff game? Miami, who just lost to Georgia Tech, will host the playoff game. At the moment, I mean, it is bizarre. This is a made for TV event each week. There's no reason that they're even doing it. They shouldn't even be doing it right now because it's giving everybody false hope. It's going to change 5 more times or whatever before we have the final one. And all this means nothing other than gives us something to talk about the day after.
Well, it's kind of like the mock drafts in the NFL. It's not even going to be close to correct because there's a lot that has to happen. But it's a talking point. It gives us something to talk about. It gives a lot of schools and fans, and don't forget the Raging Cajuns. They got a chance to finish 11-1 and go to the Sun Belt Conference Championship game. And if they win that, they'd be 12-1. Now they would need some help from the American West and some Atlantic American Conference to maybe slip in and be that group of 5 representative. It's not out of the possibility. It's slim, especially if they end up 12-1. Now, if for some reason they don't end up 12-1, then they wouldn't be that team. So, and then Tulane Green Wave, who that's the only team the Raging Cajuns lost to. Slim chance, but they got more of a chance today than LSU's got, if you want to boil it down. But I didn't even pay attention. I saw that there was coming out, and I'm like, hey, well, we don't know if that's going to happen. And then it's good. We've seen upsets every weekend, big time upsets, and we're going to see more.
How about this? LSU, Tulane, and UL technically are all still alive for the playoffs. The LSU scenario, if I can remember it correctly, for them to get
You jumped out a minute. Right?
Scenario for them to get to Atlanta is, I want to say, Tennessee beating Georgia. Arkansas has got to beat somebody big on their schedule. That was the one that was tricky. I want to say Arkansas's got. Does Arkansas have Alabama coming up, or Arkansas's got Ole Miss coming up, something like that? They've got a big game. There was it wasn't completely crazy, but it was. And then I want to say it was Texas. I'm going to look at it, but there is a realistic scenario. Not realistic, But there is a scenario, a path that's not just unbelievably crazy that has LSU playing Tennessee in Atlanta in the championship game with the way all the tiebreakers and everything has to fall out. There was like 4 things that had to happen that I saw yesterday online, which was just absolutely crazy. I think if LSU, if those things happen and LSU wins out, I may file a TRO, a temporary restraining order, to not allow LSU to go to Atlanta for the championship, because they do not deserve to go to Atlanta for a championship.
Well, Carl Dunn points out if LSU wins out, Tennessee loses to Georgia, and Arkansas beats Missouri. And both of those things are possible.
Wait.
Well, I think I don't know if it's possible LSU to win out as much.
Say that again. What is it? What's the scenario?
He says, Carl Dunn says, if LSU wins out, Tennessee loses to Georgia, Arkansas beats Missouri.
Arkansas beats Missouri. Okay. All right. LSU.
Well, all of that's possible.
That's it? That's the only 3 things?
Well, that's what Carl said.
I thought the Texas A&M game came into play.
And it might because of all the tiebreakers.
Yeah. But anyway, because I think because Texas, because we got to get Texas to. Well, no, Texas has the two losses now. I don't know. But let's hope that Carl's right. I know it was something.
Let's let it play out.
Yesterday, it's a bizarre scenario to think that LSU is even alive for Atlanta. They do not deserve to go to Atlanta. The way they got manhandled on Saturday and just absolutely destroyed. They let a quarterback run for almost 200 yards against them, and giant holes. Barely touched them at times. It was really gross. The defense was on the field for too long. I know the offense didn't help them much. I know when it was 14-6 and they got the ball back over and after stopping them on 4th and 1, that was it right there. Go ahead, get a tie the very first play. The quarterback fumbles, Nussmeier fumbles. That really was it right at that point. Or the next play, it's over. I know in theory it seemed close, but the rest of the way so embarrassing defensively. They just go on, and then now the USC loss looks more and more embarrassing. But I don't know. This is going to be an interesting. I'm really looking forward to it. Although LSU is not going to be in the playoffs, I'm really looking forward to the playoffs because I'm telling you, Tommy, this is the year where anybody in that 12 could win. Anybody. There is no dominant number one. Nobody's going to fear going to Oregon. No one's going to fear playing, whether it be Tennessee or Georgia or Alabama. Nobody's going to fear those teams like they used to. It's truly a 1 through 12 has a chance to end up in the championship.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting for a lot of fans across the country. Going to be some playoff games on campuses. That's going to be a new thing. That's going to be a big thing. There's going
to be a lot of teams, too, that watch the playoffs and are kicking themselves in the rear because there's going to be some iffy teams get into that playoffs, and there's going to be a lot of other teams that were right there. That were right there on the fringe. If we'd have just did this, if we'd have just made that kick or made that stop or played better in that one game, we would have been in the playoffs. There's going to be a ton of teams lined up with the woulda, coulda, shoulda, Jim Mora thoughts as soon as the playoff bracket are in.
No question about that.
All right, tell us about Tremonti.
Well, today's a lunch special, $6.99 burger and fries. You can eat it here. You can get it to go. Then, of course, gift cards are available. Any denomination, come get your gift cards at Tremonti's. Use them for anything in the store. Anything. Wine, liquor, seafood, meat, steaks, side dishes, your holiday turkeys, which you can order now. Fried turkey, rotisserie turkey, smoked turkey. Call up, place your order. They'll have it ready for you. Give you a time to pick it up. It'll be in a little styrofoam ice chest, wrapped up in foil, good to go. Eating instructions, the whole bit. Order your turkeys now. It's not too early. And get those gift cards from Tremonti's Meat and Seafood. And don't forget, we're Saturday radio moving on the clock. Sports Shorts Radio will go 12:30 to 2:30 this Saturday in Baton Rouge, live from the Walk-Ons in Brewley due to the LSU 2:30 kickoff. So we'll remind you about that on Friday. Don't forget to like and share this show. Doesn't matter whether you're watching on YouTube, X or Facebook. Like and share this show. That helps everybody. I want to again thank Robin Fambro for coming by, stopping by, and talking about the LHSAA situation with U High and all of the football teams in the state. Good luck in the playoffs this week. We'll see how all that plays out. On behalf of Mike and everybody here at Tremonti's, on behalf of Robin Fambro and Ronnie Rance, I'm Tommy Christ, fan. Have a great day, everyone.